Again, welcome. My name is John Morton, and I am doing the Week 3 Go-To training. We're going to talk a little bit today about collaboration and gamification. Those are our two topics, so thanks everybody for being here. And hopefully everyone should be able to see my screen. It should say Psychology of Play, Collaboration and Team Building. If you run into any issues, let me know. Again, also if there's any audio issues, let me know. Hopefully everyone can hear me. If my volume is, hopefully it's good. If you can't adjust it on your end, let me know. How's everybody enjoying Psychology of Play so far? Fairly well. Much better than last month's class. All right, James, glad to hear it. Kennedy, it's interesting. Okay, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you're finding it interesting. I think it's a pretty fun class. It's fun for us to teach. So hopefully it's fun for everybody to take. Really enjoying it. Joanne, okay, awesome. Wait, this is fun. Excellent. That is our goal and ambition is to make it kind of a fun class. We want to have a good time, and take some different looks at how things work, how fun can be a part of our everyday life as adults and as high functioning adult human beings working in creative fields. So, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about collaboration and team building initially, and then in the second half of the Go-To training, we're going to be talking about gamification. So, settle in, and we'll get started. Has everyone heard the term synergy at some point? I'm sure it's come up. I'm sure everyone's heard it. Does anyone want to take a stab at kind of just going through what that means or what they think that means? And you can type if you want, or you feel free. You can use the hand raise button. It's a little button that looks like a hand. You can click on that, and I'm happy to call on people, and you can just talk if that works out better for you. So feel free to jump in if anyone has thoughts or ideas on synergy, what that means, what they think it means, what it means to them. Anyone at all? James, two things working together. Yeah, that's definitely, it's always going to be, multiple forces coming together. Okay. Yeah, that is absolutely the start of it. Anyone else want to add to that? The whole idea behind synergy, and I'm sure someone's feverishly typing this up as I say it, but it's just I can talk faster than most people can type. It's when two or more things come together, and the final product that they're able to produce is greater than the sum of their parts. So it's each person might bring a skill to the table, and that skill's great. Wade Willard, there you go. Yeah, the whole is greater than the simple sum. Exactly. That's really that's the part that we want to focus on. Right. So when we're all able to, we each have a skill set we bring to the table, and individually those are great. But when we can all collaborate and work together, our final product that we're able to produce is better than anything, than the simple sum of our parts. I think about that in terms of education. We each have interesting skill set that we teach here at Full Sail. And those classes individually are great, but when they all come together, we create entire degree programs. We have full, complete, kind of all-encompassing education system that people say, this collective experience is more valuable than each of these parts individually. So that's kind of the goal of it. Ideally, we find synergy when we're working within groups. I know a lot of times group work can be a dirty word to some people. They maybe have had a bad experience. Maybe they, have different leadership styles or different teamwork styles. They want to work a certain way. They have maybe some set ideas about how they'd like to do things, or maybe some people just want to work alone. It's totally understandable. inevitably, it seems like we find ourselves working in groups, even if it's small groups. And typically, the stages of a group are laid out like this. We have the forming stage of our group, where usually everyone, think about anytime you've been in a group, you walk in, you meet everybody, you kind of start to get to know what hey, what do you like? What do you want to work on? Those type of conversations. It's what's called the forming stage. So the group is forming. Everyone's getting together, feeling each other out, maybe figuring out some ideas about direction within the group, what you want to go, or which direction you want to go, um, so on and so forth. After that comes what's called the storming stage. The storming stage is usually, maybe we've met each other and figured out, kind of where we all stand, but maybe we're not all in agreement. We're not aligned in our ideas, what we want to do, what we think is important. And it takes getting through that. So working out, okay, well, maybe you want to work on X and I want to work on Y, and kind of figuring out the what that's actually going to look like in practical application, what the group's actually going to do. But inevitably there's going to be a little bit of conflict there in the storming stage. After that, we get into what's called the norming stage. The norming stage is where we, hopefully are through most of that conflict of the storming stage, and we start working together. We start saying, okay, I'm finding my groove. I'm figuring out, where I belong, how I can be helpful to this group. I know. If I need help with a certain task, I know who to go to for that, and vice versa. People know what my specialty is, and I know what theirs is, and we're kind of starting to figure out, what it looks like to work together in a group. You work together in a group for long enough, and you start to get into the performing stage or high performance stage, where as a group you're saying, hey, we've worked the kinks out, we're getting our work done, we're pretty efficient, we're able to take a problem, we each take our piece or portion of that problem, we all know we've got a good work balance going, everyone's doing their part, and we're performing. And then the final stage, the adjourning stage. So, unfortunately, every group has to end. Sometimes we finish one project and the group dissolves. Sometimes, for one reason or another, people have to leave the group. But all things eventually kind of come to their natural ends. Inevitably, as a project gets finished, some big task that we had to do gets completed, and if the group's not given a new task, we tend to end our groups. We say, okay, well, we worked together, we served our purpose, and now we can move along. And that's typically what you're going to find in any group that you work in. I will say sometimes groups might go straight from storming to adjourning if they can't figure out how to work together. That does sometimes happen. But in an ideal setting, this is kind of what a group looks like when you're working together. What are some of the norms or things that you've come to expect here at Full Sail? And again, feel free to just jump in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you and unmute you, and we can all chat in there. But what are some of the things that either you've heard, your friends who went here, someone who recommended the school to you, or things you've seen? Maybe you've been following the social media streams, things like that, live lectures, where it says, yeah, definitely, we definitely have our live lectures. Great teacher. Wade, you're man after my own heart. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that live lectures and right. I think we have a pretty great instructional staff and faculty here at Full Sail. I think those are a couple big things. I'll tell you that in a lot of cases, especially later on in degree programs, there is group work. So kind of be aware of that. Keep that on your radar. Some people love it and some people hate it. And I realize that for a lot of people, especially, when you're all spread out, it can be difficult to work in groups. Ways as fun classes too. I think the class, I think what's interesting, about, something like that, fun classes is that, if you're truly, if you're really interested and you're doing what you love, it should be fun for you. It should be enjoyable. My dad has that saying, or he says it, it's not his saying, but he says, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Which there's some truth to that. If you like how you're spending your time day in and day out, it doesn't feel like work, which is pretty awesome. Um, yeah, James. I think that's why a lot of people are here, because we want to love what we do. At the end of the day, nobody wants to go to work and be miserable all day, and there's plenty of people who do it. Yeah, Wade agrees. Yeah, I think it's important to find what you love to do and then do that thing, whatever that looks like. I think some of the other norms that tend to come up are, the technology components. Everyone, eventually you get your computers, you get your technology packages. So those are things. Passion is another big one. Wade says it becomes a hobby with pay. Yeah, it does. If you're doing something you really love to do, it can be pretty pleasant to go do the work that you love doing. People are all passionate, is what I find here. Sometimes that passion is their key feature. So a lot of times we come in here, we say, hey, I don't have this skill set yet, but I want to learn it and I'm passionate about it. And I think that for a lot of people, that's what carries them through, is having that passion. So those are some of the things that I've seen and that I recognize on a day in and day out basis, in my position. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to kind of think about that as you move through your education. Knowing that hopefully everyone around you is just as passionate about their career, where they're going, what they want to be doing, as you are. Conflict. This is it's a topic that's really interesting. I don't want to say a fan of conflict. I don't want to say I'm, the guy who goes to stir the pot or anything like that. But I really, I don't like having unresolved issues. So what that means is, a lot of times that means addressing an issue, and for a lot of people that means a conflict. I'm the type of person who'd rather, just say, hey, lay my cards on the table. Here's how things are. Here's how I feel about something, and be able to move past it than to avoid it. And that's not everyone's style, and that's okay. That's just how I feel about conflict. But it tends to kind of make some people's skin crawl a little bit. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'd rather just kind of let everything fly below the radar." Which is definitely, it's a tactic, it's a technique, which we'll get into. But conflict is it's inevitable. So I'll just say, think about where you stand on it as we go through these next few slides, and perhaps where other people stand on it. So the idea that conflict can be costly to a company is pretty interesting, and I don't think trying to avoid confrontation at all costs. That's definitely one way of it. It weighs at different points of view. Yeah, everyone has their own points of view on it. So conflict is associated with emotional fatigue, absenteeism, and turnover. Um, I'm confident that everyone has had some sort of experience with this, and maybe it's in school, maybe it's in work, maybe there's something that you didn't want to do, something that you're a lot of times trying to avoid, maybe avoiding a conflict. People will, I've had students who stayed home from school because they didn't like a teacher. Or maybe they were in conflict with someone else at school or at a job, and maybe they sought out a different job instead of addressing the conflict. All these things can happen, but what we find out is that when we have conflict, right, people, it's emotionally tiring to be in conflict. The absenteeism is a huge thing, and the turnover. A company doesn't want to lose employees if they can avoid it, especially if they're good employees. So figuring out how to manage and deal with conflict is pretty important. A a few of the ideas that we come across, misconceptions about conflict, the idea that it's bad and should be avoided. I'll say it can more often than not, it's uncomfortable, is what I'll say. I don't know that bad is the word, but a lot of times we say, oh, everyone should just be, in perfect harmony with one another. And the reality, unfortunately, is that it's just unlikely to happen. It's pretty unlikely that we're all just going to be sitting around the campfire singing "Kumbaya." Um, you know, it's it says my mom taught me so. Otherwise, I'm gonna slap. What I wouldn't want you to get a slap. Um, yeah, Wade says right. Some one idea could be better than another, and that could definitely cause a conflict. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so right, there sometimes it's worth addressing when we are in conflict with other people. The idea that conflict represents a misunderstanding or a breakdown in communication, that's a big one right there. Um, I can be fully self-expressed. I can get my points across well. I can communicate that clearly to you, and you could still not like what I have to say. You can email me and say, "Hey, Mr. Morton, I didn't do my homework because I was out, drinking with my friends." And I'm going to say, that's unfortunate. You should have done your homework. And I don't think that warrants an extension, because it sounds like, you prioritized, having a good time with your friends over your schoolwork. I don't think either of us have misunderstood one another. You said, hey, here's where I stand. You've communicated clearly and effectively, but you might still want an extension, and I might still be unwilling to give it to you. Those type of things happen. So conflict doesn't always, come up from misunderstandings or breakdown in communication. We can just it's a naturally occurring thing. Just sometimes we're say, hey, I think the house should be painted red, and I think the house should be painted blue, and we both are pretty clear on that and why we think one is better than the other, and we still find ourselves at odds. That happens, and it's life. And the last one, that all conflict can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. That's just not the case. A lot of times, we find ourselves in conflict, and it's sometimes it's just a win-lose situation. One person gets their way and the other person doesn't. A lot of times it's just, the person with, maybe a higher position, or, person who has more, is more broadly supported, can a lot of times get their answer. And Aubrey brings up an interesting point of compromise, and even that, a compromise doesn't necessarily mean that a conflict has been resolved to everyone's satisfaction. If I say I think we should paint the house red, and you say I think we should paint the house blue, and a compromise is to paint the house purple because it's halfway in between red and blue, we might both hate purple. But that's that could be that is a compromise. So again, even if we compromise, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is satisfied with the solution. Yeah, Wade, the idea of a purple house makes him say yikes. So right, it's just people, a lot of times people want their way, and they know that. And I think that I found, no barnyard paint. He says, I think that what I've found in a lot of situations where I come into conflict, especially like, in if I'm at home, where I'm working with my wife, Joanna, should we get a dog? Yes, we should. And then blaming me when the dog behaves bad. There you go. That's a thing that could definitely happen. Um, a lot of times, one person gets their way and the other person doesn't, and a lot of times people trade those things, back and forth. I know, you've all heard the term, choose your battles. I go through that with my wife sometimes. If she has a very strong opinion on something and I don't have a very strong opinion on something, we a lot of times, she gets her way. If she has a stronger opinion on it than me, I just say, hey, it's not, this is about a 3 in my book as far as how much I care about, though it happens, and it might be a 7 or an 8 or a 9 in her book. yeah, pick your battles. Too many battles. Put some back. Aubrey says it was funny. I had this experience, with my wife. We have twin boys, and they just turned 1. Happy wife, happy life. Wade says. We had this conversation one time though, where we were talking about, I don't remember what the issue specifically was. Maybe it was what type of baby carriers we should be using, or something about, hey, what do you think about, or maybe car seats, and what kind of car seats do you think we should get? And I honestly can't tell you what the situation was. My wife said, well, I looked up these, things, and I want you to have, go form, go do the research and look it up. And I said to her, I said, I'm more than happy to go look it up and do the research and think about it. But if I go and I do this research and I look at it, I'm going to become entrenched in my opinion because I've done the research on it. So I'll think whatever I think is best, like that will be my opinion, and I'll have more information to back it up. So, I trust my wife, and I told her that. I said, I trust you and I trust your judgment on a lot of things. Why don't you tell me what you think is best, and I'll support your decision? Because if we come up with different decisions, if I say we've both done our research and we both came up at odds with one another, then how are we ever going to make that decision? Because we're both going to be pretty deeply entrenched in our own opinion. And she said, hey, like that's actually, aside from, she was happy that I trust her judgment, obviously. And I do. She's great. She's a smart lady. She said that's actually a pretty good point. If you become entrenched in your own opinion and it's different than mine, we might not find a great solution. We might both be annoyed about it. So again, it's one of those situations where I said, we can kind of just take turns on this. I go and I research other things, and we kind of just come up with what we think is best, for child rearing overall. Sorry, that was a long, drawn out explanation, but it for me it's applicable to the situation. So I think kind of how we manage conflict in our own lives is really important, and it can be helpful, hopefully, to some of you. So we have some different conflict resolution styles. The first one, we have the big scary shark, which is competing. It's assertive and uncooperative, my way or the highway. So someone who says, hey, this is the way it's going to be, I'm insistent on it, deal with it. Plenty of people who feel this way. I find that a lot of times people who fall more into this end up doing a lot more work alone, because they're maybe they're not willing to work with other people, or maybe they have a harder time getting people who want to work with them. But it's definitely it's one way of going about things. A lot of times, you find someone who maybe is leading a group who says it's going to be my way and that's how we're going to do it. And they tend to take on leadership roles a lot. Wade comments it's too bossy. Yeah, a lot of people find it that way. And say, hey, I don't really like that leadership style. I don't really want to work for someone who's that way, and that's fine. You might find people though who are not particularly invested in an idea, and they say, hey, this person's got all the ideas. All I have to do is follow directions. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just one of the styles. We have accommodating, so unassertive and cooperative, the go along to get along type. Someone who's pretty accommodating might work really well with someone who's competing, who says it's my way or the highway. They might say, hey, I'm just going to go with the flow and do what I'm told. Again, it's not good, bad, or right or wrong. It's just how people deal with conflict, how they feel. Again, some people might just say in a certain situation, hey, this isn't really that important to me. I'm not willing to take a stand on this issue. So it's definitely a style that people use. We have avoiding, and I realize it's hard to see, but it says unassertive and uncooperative. A lot of times what's called the invisible group member, and the turtle is a great example of that, because you kind of just try to duck out and hide from things. I feel like these show up a lot. You maybe you're not interested, or a lot of time, maybe you had an idea and it didn't go your way, and then you decided you're gonna switch. Maybe you said my way or the highway, and you had somebody else in the group who also said my way or the highway, and their way got picked and your way didn't, and then you shifted. You said, well, if it's not my idea, then I'm going to, pack up my ball and go home. And you kind of shifted into that avoiding character. Again, these are all this it's all a fluid state. It's not just you have to be one. There's all different kind of in between stages with these. So just keep that in mind. Then we have compromising. So moderate in assertiveness and moderate in cooperativeness. So they're looking for middle of the road solutions. They want to find something that, hopefully keeps everyone happy. Maybe it takes a little part of everyone's idea. The compromise might be the person who says, no, it's not going to be red and it's not going to be blue. It's going to be purple. James says it's not always a bad thing. If you agree with everything that's happening and have nothing to add, being invisible isn't that bad. This is a solid point, James. I'm not gonna take it away. They're all of these roles show up. It's there's not a good or bad role. There's I hope no one's taking these and saying, oh no, I fall into this one. There's no right role to be in. It's just awareness. It's awareness that these roles exist, and that you'll see them, and maybe which one you fall into and where other people fall, and how you can work together. So going on from compromising, we have collaborating. The collaborator is both assertive and cooperative. So maybe you say, hey, I'd like to work together. How can we make this happen? Wade says, that's me. Yeah, awesome. It's great if we can identify ourselves in one of these things. That's really the idea is to say, hey, where do I fit into this? Maybe where does everyone else fit into this who I end up working with on a regular basis? And knowing that's pretty important. All right, so there we go. We have kind of the chart of how that all breaks down. You can see on one axis, it's the desire to satisfy your own concerns. We go from unassertive to very assertive, and down at the bottom, desire to satisfy others' concerns, and we go from uncooperative to cooperative. And we have you kind of see where everyone sits. You have the competition style where you're unwilling to really deal with many other people, and you very much want it to be your way. The avoider, who is again unassertive and uncooperative, who just kind of maybe is just physically present, but not really doing much necessarily. The accommodation style, where you're pretty willing to go along and do the task, but you maybe don't really have any strong feelings about how it's going. The compromise, which is kind of right there in the middle of everything, and then the collaborator, who is who wants to work with other people and is really willing to push their agenda and say, hey, I think that this agenda is great. How can we make it happen? So when it comes to working with a group, there are a number of tactics that we use to kind of find our best ideas. Brainstorming is a big one. I'm sure everyone's done this at some point. You all kind of sit down, you start throwing out ideas. You say, oh, I think this is the way to go. So on and so forth, and you kind of just keep moving through ideas in a brainstorm. The takeaways during this situation, you're looking for quality ideas. You want to find out what the best solutions are for the situation you're faced with. So, looking at what everyone's bringing to the table. The idea that you're not judging other people's ideas is also very important. I think a lot of times people will be far, far more willing to express their ideas if they don't feel like they're being judged. I know people have had that. You walk into, a situation, you say, "Oh, I got this idea. It's this," and someone says, "That's stupid." That's not a helpful thing to say. It's not helpful to tell someone that their idea is stupid, because what it means is, first, you're kind of jerky, and it's maybe not the nicest thing to do. But aside from that, maybe that person, hey, their first idea wasn't a smash hit, but their second idea was pretty good, or they have some other ideas, or can add to ideas. But a lot of times, if we get somebody kind of on the ropes, to speak, right out of the gate, they're going to kind of shut down and not be particularly willing to work with us. And we may kind of right, put them in a box that they don't want to be in. So being open-minded to other people's ideas, hearing them out, whether or not you think it's a great idea or a terrible idea, Wayne says, hear them out. Yeah, absolutely. It's super important to do that. Write down every idea that comes up. If you have something, a lot of times, everyone shouts their ideas out, and you might come across an idea that you didn't think was good initially, but when you go back and you look at it, kind of you have that, take that second pass, you see something maybe you didn't think about the first time. So keeping records, when you're doing some brainstorming, you get everyone to keep their records individually. If you say, "Hey, here are my ideas," you write down your ideas as a group. You can kind of submit them, make a text, and keep them all in one place. And I think the big one from this is, don't be afraid to build onto others' ideas. And what that means is, somebody might have a great quarter of an idea. They might have, 4 parts of their idea might be, or I'm sorry, 3 parts might be total garbage, but they got 1 part that's solid gold. They said, "Hey, I got this great idea. Let's do this." And you say, "Oh, I really like the first part of it. How can we build onto that first part? How can we, take this and bring it to the next level?" Wade says there's more than one way to skin a cat. Your way might not be the best way. That's absolutely correct. I've never skinned a cat, but I imagine that there are multiple ways. So right, again, I always, I think about, no, I agree with you, Wade. I think that, the assumption that, our way is the best way, we a lot of times figure out that it's not, and that there's a better way to do things. So right, knowing what that is, it's super important. I always like to think about, it's like, if we got this great, maybe a great pizza product, we have, a great food. And no, wait, I'm from the South. I'm familiar with the term. I'm sorry. I was just bantering with you. Wait, so it's a Southern term. The more than one way to skin a cat. It totally is. I'm sorry. I was having fun with that. So if somebody says, "Hey, we have this great product, we have these awesome pizzas, and we want to sell them, and I think that we should deliver them on unicycles." It's like, "Oh man, those pizzas are delicious. I've had them before. I know they're great. I want to roll with that. But I think unicycle delivery really might not be the best, most efficient way to do business. It's maybe cars. Maybe it seems gimmicky. It seems like people are going to fall a lot. Maybe they'll drop their pizzas. So it's like, you can have some some ideas where 1 part is great and the second part is terrible." Wait to see you buying. Yeah, I mean, if we had a unicycle delivery pizza business, I'd be happy to share it with everyone, but we unfortunately don't have it at this point. But the idea, right? Again, that um, you can start off in a great place, and then you kind of that idea can be awful. A lot of times we a lot of times, unfortunately, we take an idea that we think is great that has a lot of bad stuff in it, and we roll with it without taking the bad stuff out. But it's okay. It's okay to just say, hey, I love this piece of this idea. What can we do with this great piece? And being able to recognize what's great in an idea and how to pick that out and maybe separate it from some of the less great parts of it. It takes some skill. I'll say that if if somebody's married to this idea of pizza with unicycle delivery, and you're like, I love the pizza, but unicycles seem like a terrible idea. It's being able to separate that and how to have that conversation with somebody where you say, hey, I think this idea is great, but how can we make it even better? There's definitely some reinforcement that needs to go into that in a conversation that sounds like that. Hey, I love this part of this idea. That's great. How can we keep going on with this? You don't need to tell them that the rest of their idea is garbage. You can just take the part that's great and say, hey, let's roll with this great part. You don't, they don't need to know that the rest of their idea is terrible necessarily. So finding our flow within a group. Reginald says we would need a lot of insurance for that. Yeah, we absolutely would. Some ideas with finding group flow. So groups in an ideal situation have clear collective goal. We have to all be on the same page with something. We have to be figuring out where, we need to know the destination if we're going to make the trip. If we just all set out and say, who knows where we'll go? Hopefully we'll get there. We're going to wander a lot. It might not go great. And I think people a lot of times without a clear direction get really frustrated because they say, hey, I don't even know why we're here. I don't know why we're meeting. I don't know why we're doing this stuff. What's this all about? So kind of thinking about that, having a clear collective goal, super important. Practicing deep listening is another one that's really important. I think this doesn't happen enough. And when I say deep listening, I mean like fully engaging in the act of listening to someone. Active listening is another way to do this. And one of the best ways to show people that you are actively listening to them is to listen to what they say and then paraphrase it back to them. So repeat it back to them in different words. Say, oh, it sounded like you said this, and you kind of tell them what you think that they said, and they have the opportunity. They can say, oh, that's exactly what I meant. I'm glad you're listening. Or they can say, hey, no, that wasn't quite it. You seem to think it was going in this direction, but I wanted it to actually move in a slightly different direction. So for the best clarity, deep active listening is very important. Next one's actually it's one of those improv terms. The yes and keep it moving forward. So a lot of times we have an idea. We say, yeah, that's a great idea, and here's what we can do with that idea. A lot of times we get into the habit of shooting down ideas. You say, oh, that's a bad idea, I don't want to do that. No. Start taking ideas and start saying, hey, what's good about this idea? What are the parts that work? So picking up what works and moving forward with it, as opposed to just, constantly being on the negative side of that. Engage in complete concentration. It's hard to do, but I think that a lot of times just taking our phones, if we're sitting with our group, we're working with people, just put them away, put them in our pocket, put them somewhere where they're not going to be a distraction. Give people our full attention. It's one of those things that we very seldom give people anymore these days. I think back to when I was younger and, we didn't all have cell phones. James says, I hate the phone zone with passion. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, because, right, people are engaged, they're doing other things, and the messages that they send to everyone would be very different. Wade says pizza delivery with cop cars would be faster. It would. I'm glad you picked up on that part and rolled with it and went with the part that was good. So right, again, blocking out the distractions because when I pick my phone up in the middle of a conversation, I might be worried about, my kids might be at home, and, my wife might be like, hey, I'm, losing my mind, and the kids are having something crazy happen, and she might need me. But not everyone at the table necessarily knows that. Uh, She remembers when people didn't have phones, and if someone was late, you had to guess if they were still coming. Yeah, absolutely. Um, but right, the message that it sends to someone when I'm not giving them my full attention, it can look all sorts of different ways. How that person perceives that, could be all sorts of different ways. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't care, we're all on our phones. But sometimes you run into somebody who's like, oh man, I'm trying to have a meeting or conversation, and people aren't giving me their attention. What's going on? Why are they distracted? What's happening? Um, so yeah, I think it's important to give people your full attention when it's possible. In managing the control paradox, a lot of times, one person would like at least to think that they have, they've got the reins of the group, they're in charge. But a lot of times, deferring to the group, knowing the way that they're moving, especially, when a group is moving away from someone who is clinging to control, uh, it can get to be kind of an ugly scene, So I would definitely say, just think about that. Think about if you're the one who's trying to control the group, maybe say, hey, this group is full of competent people. Am I trying to force my ideas on them? And just kind of knowing, is the control a forced thing? Is it something, is everyone happy to be moving this direction? So on and so forth. Blending egos, it can be tough. A lot of times, we have big personalities. We're very confident in ourselves and in our work. And, just making sure that, everyone is able to, meld and get in and work together. This is a big one that I hear complaints about, on a pretty regular basis, equal participation. I wish I could say everyone has to participate evenly. When I do have classes that have group work, I like to ask everyone, hey, if someone didn't participate, please let me know. Hey, there's always a little bit of contention there. What I've found, Rachel says, big egos don't blend well in group. Yeah, that definitely can be difficult. Um, what I found about the equal participation, a lot of times, setting up the goals of the group and setting up the tasks, and kind of, putting that out there and saying, okay, here are the tasks of the group, and actually going out and choosing the tasks to complete. I used to think, oh, I'm going to choose this task that I like, and it'll be, it's easier for me. I like doing it. And I thought, at one point I was like, oh, am I taking this from other people? Am I taking it because it's a task that I'm more into? And what I found was that people didn't always want the same tasks as me. A lot of times people were pretty happy that I had chosen the task that I chose because I'm a little bit more outgoing. I'm a little bit more comfortable with public speaking. I have certain things that I really don't mind doing. And other people are like, no, I'd rather do research all day. And I'm like, that sounds boring. I would love it if you did the research and I just had to talk. That's awesome. And I've had groups that worked out that way where people were like, I'm petrified of standing in front of a group. And I'm like, I don't want to go look things up. So if you'll look the things up and you'll give me the material and I can just stand in front of a group and read it, I'm like, oh, that works out perfect. And it has in the past. It won't always work out that way. But, again, find out, what your skill set is, what your strong suit is. Do the thing you're best at in your group. You can talk and I'll do the graphics. Yeah, no, exactly. There we go. Um, e- e- uh, the idea that familiarity breeds contentment. And what I mean by this is sometimes we get a little too comfortable in our groups. We start, oh, hey, we're all having a good time. And maybe we're in a group with our friends and we're moving pretty far off of the topic of our work. And a lot of times this means people are getting a little bit unsatisfied. They're saying, hey, can we get back to doing the work? So respecting everyone's time, and knowing that, hey, we might even all be friends, but we still have a task to do and getting that done. Communicate, way to stay on point. Absolutely. Communicate as much as we can. Make sure that communication is as clear as is humanly possible. Move forward with that, and harness the group's fear, the potential for failure. Let them know, hey, look, we need to get these tasks done. We need to, move forward, be productive. So let's kind of keep that in mind when we're working together in our group. That is just a continuation of the brainstorming. Move past that. So the key is finding right balance. It says the most effective business teams balance these tensions in the same way. They listen closely, they're concentrated on the task, they communicate openly so that everyone gets immediate feedback, and they trust that genius will emerge from the group, not from any one member. When that happens, groups find flow, and with it comes more effective team performance and greater innovation. I think it's really important. Those are all important points to look at. You know, when groups are working well, that's that's just what happens. They can find flow, they can work in a flow state, and it's pretty great. Pretty great work comes out of those group flow states. So if you're in that situation, that position, figure out what it will take to cultivate a flow state within your group. A few other ideas that I think are pretty interesting. I realize these pictures don't necessarily spell it all out, but talking with other people. The first picture is a couple of older women, and the idea is that you'd ask people outside of your age group. What you think. That example is ask older people. What I've found in, throughout my life, if I'm working with someone, especially if I'm working with somebody who's much older than me, someone maybe my grandparents' age, someone around that age time frame, they probably have a different way of doing things. They see the world through, a different lens. And they act differently, according to that. I remember when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time working with my next door neighbor. It says from more old school. Yeah. I spent a lot of time working with my next door neighbor who built wooden toys. And he taught me how to work with wood and how to do all this other stuff. And I remember always sitting there and thinking, this isn't how I would imagine these things go together. When we'd be building stuff. And, every time I'd sit there and I'd think that, and these toys would come together and they were, masterfully made. But it just was never really what I was expecting. And I would say, oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought that this would have come together like this. So, right, working with people who are a little bit older than you, or are a lot older than you never know what they're going to come up with. So it's definitely worth, kind of getting a different perspective. The next one's children, asking children, if you have a problem, you say, hey, what do you think about this? Sometimes children just have a way different point of view, or maybe, maybe we've gotten stuck in a certain way of thinking about a problem or an idea or a solution. And when we go ask a kid, it's brand new, it's fresh to them. They've never encountered this before. And they say, hey, what about this? And they might present an idea that's totally new and foreign and different to us. So it's worth it, if we're just trying to, if we can't figure out a problem, ask a child, see what happens. Rachel says, so we ask seniors first, kids second, and Hawaiian women third. Got it. The last picture represents people from different cultures. That's the idea. It does. If I were to make a guess, I would say it could look like a person who's from Hawaii, but I don't know. I think the idea is just right. Someone from a different cultural background. Gregor says yes. It's 3 boys, definitely. But right, so same thing. Ask someone from a different background from you. We might have a certain way of thinking about some concept or idea here in the U.S., and that might just be the way that everything goes. We say, "Oh, this is just how it's done." But you get someone from a different country, a different background, sometimes just a different part of the country, a different part of the U.S., and they say, "Oh, well, I always thought this was the best way to do something." Um, there we go. Joanne, are you from Brazil? Say Brazil in the house. Ah, wonderful. You would be interested to know that I keep a very large collection of jabuticaba, the national fruit of Brazil. So there we go. I have a very special place in my heart for the Brazilians, and their delicious fruits. So yeah, but right again, finding people from different cultural backgrounds, figuring out how they do things. Just things happen differently in different countries. It's you look at a lot of ways from Louisiana. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. And we're not far away. I live in Florida, he's in Louisiana, and yeah, it's amazing the way that we kind of view things differently based on maybe the environments we live in, what we deal with day to day, what we need to survive. It's even if you look at construction, building construction. My wife and I just bought a house, and it's an older house that was built without air conditioning. So they old houses in Florida that got built. Oh, thank you, I appreciate it. They got built without air conditioning. They got built up off the ground because you'd get airflow under the house. So airflow under the house basically makes the house cooler. And usually houses are only houses that are built that way are only one room deep. So that way you can open your windows on either side of the house and get a breeze through the house. Which is just a different construction than if you go up north. Here in the U.S., if you go up north, you look at houses and they're like, oh, they're for one, they're built out of different materials. For two, they're going to be shaped structurally different. They're probably going to be built probably around a fireplace or something like that. I don't have as much experience with up north and their construction, but again, just different things that happen. That we wouldn't necessarily think of, that wouldn't naturally occur to us. Um, Mind mapping is another pretty interesting idea. Kind of taking an idea and moving with it and parceling it out and saying, okay, well, here's an idea. Where can I go with what's the next step to take with that? If you want to go through and you kind of get a little bit more information on mind mapping, jump online. There's a bunch of tutorials. But actually like writing out the thought process, what gets you from one point to the next, how we process that way is worth looking into. So definitely something to check out if you're working on an idea and you're a little bit stuck. Kind of maybe sometimes seeing the mental process gives us all a different perspective. What I think is impressive, or can be important, is when we look at somebody else's mental process. I might say, oh well, I think this, and here's why. And somebody else might say, oh, I also thought, I had the same original thought as you, but then I went in this direction with it, or vice versa. Maybe, we each ended at a certain idea, but how we got there was vastly different. So seeing what the mental process looks like for each other can be pretty important, and helpful. And then free writing. So just kind of, putting pen to paper. I think that this is a pretty useful tool, not just for working through ideas, but for maybe self-discovery. Do with that what you will. I know that for me, a lot of times I've just needed to write my thoughts down. I've said, hey, I've got so much on my mind right now, and I just start writing. And, no one has to read it. I don't even have to read it again, but just sometimes putting a pen to paper and getting my ideas out of my head and down on paper makes it a little bit easier for me. And maybe it helps me process it a little bit better. I could say, oh, I was really worried about this thing, but as I wrote it down, I had some ideas about it that have given me, new insight into this, situation that I come across. So I'd encourage everyone, whether or not you think it's important, give it a whirl. The worst thing that happens is you waste a sheet of paper and some of the ink out of your writing utensil. The one thing I will say about free writing experience, I think it's better to do pen and paper as opposed to a keyboard. And the reason that is it's my understanding. I might be wrong. I might be way off. I may have been given bad information. But my understanding with free writing is that when we use our hand to write, it will engage both sides of our brain more effectively than will typing. So, like I said, give it a whirl. Worst thing that happens is you waste a sheet of paper and some pen, some ink out of your pen. But I think it's worth looking into. So yeah, do with that what you will. And then word association, it's that whole, I'm sure everyone's seen it in a movie at some point where someone's sitting in a psychologist's office and they say, oh, when I say this, what do you think that means? Going back and forth. You don't have to do it with a psychologist. You can just, do word association with other people. A lot of times they use this in focus groups as well. They say, oh, what do you think of when I say this? But right, if you want to get an idea of where other people are, maybe you want to see what their process looks like, use word association techniques. Just see kind of what that gets someone, what brings up for them. Maybe come up with your list of words, and then read off that list and see what everyone else associates with that. All right, well, that is the end of the first half. We're going to take a break. I have 2:56 right now. Let's take about let's take 9 minutes. Let's come back at 3:05, or I'm sorry, whatever 05 is on the next hour for you. Let's come back and we will move on with our next presentation. But I know I'm parched and ready to drink. Feel free to take a few minutes and relax, and I'll be right back. Well, fantastic. I'm glad everyone made it back. Oh, everyone with their kind words. Yes, this is me. That's what I look like. I am dressed slightly more casual. I'm wearing a flannel today, but you get the idea. Thank you. I still have my beard, so I look roughly like that still. Thanks. I do wear bow ties from time to time. It's pretty fun. People seem to like them a lot. So, all right. So, at this point, we're in week 3 of psychology of play. We've looked at play, how that affects us as individuals. We've talked a little bit about play histories, play personalities, how play affects our brain, how flow works. We've looked at creativity. And we're ready to take like a little bit deeper look at how some of these strategies work on a larger scale. So our map for our discussion today starts with motivation. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about self-determination theory. We're going to look at gamification, fun theory, and mixing work and play together. So I'm sure at this point everyone has, has seen some stuff from Dan Pink. Dan Pink's Whole New Mind. Get the size right. There we go. So everyone's heard a little bit about him, seen a little bit about what he says. I think Dan Pink's work's pretty interesting to me, from what I've seen of it at least. I really like his take on stuff. But right, that was part of the readings this week. So hopefully everyone, got a little bit of an idea about where he stands with, business work, management, things like that. One of the ideas that we come across is the idea that we're living in a conceptual age. And, in his writings, Dan Pink talks a little bit about it. He explains, we're no longer in the information age. Today's society has shifted to what's called the conceptual age. And what that means, so we're reaping the benefits of the information that's all around us. So, this is an experience of that, is we're able to, I know I have some people who are, kind of probably across the whole age bracket, but we have people who, remember when I was a kid and we didn't have a computer, in my house, there just wasn't a computer there. and now, we're at this point where we're almost always constantly connected to people. Connection is, a phone call or an email away. Information is readily available at our fingertips. We just have to Google it, and it's there. When I when I was a kid, I'd ask my mom questions. I was inquisitive, and I'd just say, "Oh, how does this work, or what does this thing do?" My mom would always say, "Well, would be a great place to find that out." And I knew, because she always said the same thing. She'd always say, "At the library," and it was like this jokey thing she did with me. And I'd always be like, "I just wanted the answer. I just wanted you to know what the answer was and tell me." Um, and today we just, it's Google. That's it. James says, "I remember when my dad had an external modem, and all it got was good for reading, yeah, for the BPS system." Yeah, technology's really blown up in the past 20 years, I'd say. Yeah, since I ask my parents questions, and they say pick up a dictionary or Google it. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, we have those conversations on a pretty regular basis. Sometimes, it's funny because we'll ask somebody, and the whole conversations have kind of or I guess arguments about things have kind of all gone out the window. Because I remember years ago I'd say, "Oh, well, as soon as I get home I'm looking this up and finding it out," and now I just pull out my phone and I look it up. I can figure out the answer pretty quickly. um, the whole idea, though, that where we're going with this, we've seen the information age replace a lot of the jobs, those that or require left brain tasks, such as kind of logical sequential work. So in a way, we've definitely been outsourced by machines and programs in a lot of that sequential work. Um, what we find is, an attractive candidate in the workforce changed over the years. Now what people are looking for and what they think is the most important are characteristics that are traditionally right brain or thought of to be right brain characteristics. So imagination, creativity, empathy, big picture thinking, artistry. Wade says he would ask his dad, and his dad would say, "Ask your mom," and back and forth. Yeah, no. I think that as kids, we all had a lot of questions, and it's nice now that we can find out the answers pretty quickly. So right, these skills are becoming what's important in today's business world. For a lot of your industries, you're already utilizing these skills. You're developing mastery with these skills, which gives you an advantage in the competitive markets. Um, Everyone's going to walk out of here, and they're all going to, everyone will graduate and have a piece of paper. And the piece of paper will say, "I have X, Y, and Z technical skills," which is great. You need those technical skills. They're really important for your job. But, it's what we call, soft skills, inventiveness, empathy, big picture thinking, your ability to kind of reason stuff out. Those are the things that not everyone. It's not necessarily something that's taught. It can be learned, but it's not. We don't teach class on inventiveness or on empathy. A lot of the work that we do in psychology of play relates back to this stuff, but it's not stuff that's traditionally taught in traditional academic settings. My education is all in social work, so we did actually go into a lot of that stuff as far as empathy, things like that. We didn't talk so much about inventiveness, but sometimes it would come up. But right, for all of you, the creativity, the stuff that's not just your tactical skills, is what people want to see. People will, your technical skills will speak for themselves. You can say, "Here's my portfolio, here are my technical skills," and people will say, "Okay, cool." everyone, hopefully has the same technical skill set. And if they don't, you're obviously going to be ahead of them. But, what else do you bring to the table is what's important in that. So what's the call to action for us? What actually motivates employees? We'll take a look at what causes us to perform and achieve at work, and we may or may not be surprised to find that we aren't as predictable as we would think. Traditional reward systems look more or less like this. We have big bonuses, plus rewards, plus incentives, equal employee accomplishments. That's kind of been the formula over the years. People tend to agree, disagree. You don't have to necessarily answer, but you think about that, kind of where you stand on that. It's not necessarily how things work. The two misconceptions behind that reasoning, is why people are working and what motivates them to work. When it comes to performance and accomplishments, the assumption is that like money is the biggest driver for increased performance. We think, if I just keep throwing money at this problem, that will fix it. We found that that's not the case. This comes up. There's it's not part of this presentation, but there's there's a video basically about like what motivates people. It's Dan Pink talking about it. The secret to motivation, which is clearly what everyone wants, we find out, and it comes to us courtesy of Dan Pink. He pinpoints that the secret to high performance is the drive to do things for their own sake. What that translates into practical matters is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is the desire to be self-directed. We don't want to be micromanaged. We want to be able to kind of go do our own thing, have some freedom to make things the way that we see them fit. We say, I'd like to do things this way. We want mastery. So we're basically saying, we want to be the best at the stuff that we find fun, interesting, and satisfying. We want to be great at that. I think everyone probably wants to be the best at whatever it is they're doing. I don't think anyone signed up to say, let's be mediocre, let's float around in life, and let's kind of do not a great job. And last is purpose. Everyone has a reason that they're doing what they're doing. Passion, creativity. You're drawn to your artistic endeavors. For some people, it is money. Sometimes money is the main driver initially. But everyone wants to do something for a reason. Everyone has something else floating behind them. Knowing what that is and keeping it at the forefront is super important. Your purpose or reason for things is what makes coming into work a lot easier, or coming into school in our case. Companies that are doing well right now are the companies that are driven and motivated by individuals and their purpose. The why it is that they're doing what they're doing. I'm sure at some point everyone's probably seen the golden circle. Start with why. If you haven't, you can watch that. It's a Simon Sinek video. But right, why are we doing what we're doing? It's important to know. I'm sorry. Does anyone want to talk about what motivates them? What's inspired you? What's making you do what you're doing? If you want, I can unmute you and you can just talk about it. If anyone wants to raise their hand. anyone at all. Or you can just type. Wait, what is chip foos? I can't tell if that's a typo or if that's just a thing I don't know about. World's greatest car designer. Okay, do you want to elaborate? I can unmute you if you want. From overhauling. Not familiar. But interesting in any case. I'll have to look him up. So that's what motivates you? James says I could give you a bunch of deep, meaningful reasons, but really, when it comes down to it, the money is a motivator. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, again, it's knowing what's important to each of us. Clifton says video games. Yeah, right. Knowing what's important to you. Some people really want to see their name on a big screen, or they want to see their name in the credits of a game. They there's a lot of times family, other things, whatever it is, whatever motivates you. It's not necessarily you don't have to necessarily get into it with me, but knowing what it is, as well as making people happy. As I'm happy as happy as you are when you play them. Okay, yeah, I get that. James says I want all that stuff too. Also, I'm tired of being broke. Totally. No, I get that. I was in college. I remember what that was like. It was not cool. I did not love it. Wade says I want to be a car designer for GM. And he's a huge inspiration. Awesome. That's really cool. One of my childhood friends is an automotive designer at GM. So, yeah, no, I'm sure I can ask my friend about that, and he'll probably know exactly who you're talking about. So that's pretty cool. And right, again, it's important to know what matters to you and know what's important. So moving forward. Did everyone already watch the candle video? I'm sorry, the candle problem. Is everyone familiar with it? He has won Designer of the Year several times. Okay, that's awesome. Very cool. So, the candle problem is an experiment set up by Carl Dunker, and participants were asked. Participants were asked to find a way to attach a lit candle to the wall in a way that the candle wax wouldn't drip onto the table below, using only a box of matches, box of thumbtacks, or a lighter in this case. Has everyone watched this? I know there's a video that we see. I'm just not sure. I don't want to give it away. Has anyone thought about this? If you haven't watched the video, the best way to do this, to get the candle attached to the wall and have it lit in a way that it does not drip on the floor. No, okay. Well, James, you're in luck. Can you think of a way to get this candle attached to the wall in a way that it won't drip wax? Or can anyone jump in if you have the answer? Anyone at all? Nope. All right. Well, if you haven't, basically what ended up happening, the participants, eventually figured out that they could empty the box of tacks onto the table. Oh yeah, no, there's a real answer. Uh, yep, exactly. Wade. So empty the box tax, mount the box to the wall, put the candle inside the box. That way you can light it, and it will work. And act as a way to keep everything from hitting the floor. Yep, yep, exactly. So for this experiment, there were two test groups. One they labeled as like the low drive group, and they were told that the study was testing problem solving to see, which would be best for a later experiment. They were offered no prize to do this, so there was no what they would call incentive to do this. It was just hey, here's an idea, do it. Um, then there was what Carl Dunker considered the high drive group, and they were told that depending on how quickly they could solve the problem, they could win money, and only the top 25% would win the cash prize. So basically, they're introducing the idea of limited resources. Um, so that's where they had to start the game. Can anyone tell me which group they think did best, the high drive group or the low drive group? James says high drive. Wade says high drive. Anyone else chiming in? Well, all right. I'm going to assume everyone else either agrees or doesn't want for success. Um, what they found out about this was that when rewards were offered, it took people 3 minutes longer to solve the problem. So, we'll get into why, but the idea is that it's not all about the Benjamins. We think a lot of times that maybe is the case. The problem is common sense. You say, Wade? Like the solution to it? Yeah. Okay. So you're right. And here's the thing. Um, when the idea of so what we need to overcome to deal with this is what's called functional fixedness. That is the idea that we say, okay, I've got this box of tax. My functional fixedness means I only view this box of tax as a box and it can only hold tax. That's all I think about for that. Where I overcome functional fixedness is where I say this is a box that can be anything. I can use this for whatever I want. Aubrey jumped in. The high drive group put pressure on themselves, which made them take longer. Right. So the issue, the thing that we come across is that when we're offered that reward, and we know we're only going to get it from the top 25, it creates a mild amount of stress. And when the test subjects are under this type of stress, we start with our fight or flight responses. That kicks in, and our brain starts saying, "Oh, we got to get this done quick. What can we do?" What we find out is basically the creative thinking and problem solving areas of our brain and the prefrontal cortex shut down when we're under this type of stress. Basically our focus is narrowed when we find ourselves under stress, and we aren't able to perform creative tasks as well. So it takes creativity for us to overcome the functional fixedness of how to use that box of tax. And when we get that mild level of stress involved, it changes the way that we think. What we have found out is that they did the task similarly, where they took the box of tacks, they took the tacks out of the box, and they just presented, here's a pile of tacks, here's a box, here's a candle, here's a lighter or matches, and do it that way. At that point, you have a mechanical process, because it's clear, because the box of tacks is a box. It's not just a box of tacks. The tacks are separate. It's its own separate item, and it becomes a mechanical task. When it's a mechanical task, the reward system works, because all you have to say is, assemble this widget faster. So you think about the old days on the assembly line. You say, build cars faster, you'll get bonuses, or however that worked. It works because it's mechanical, because there's not a creative element to it. But when the creative element is there, that type of financial incentive does not seem to work, and seems to actually cause us more issues for creativity. So right, when tasks require higher functioning, higher levels of thinking and creativity, those type of incentives are actually counterproductive. Which is like kind of a crazy idea, and we wouldn't necessarily think that. Yeah. Wait, it's the same. It's a tack the box to the wall, then tack the candles to the bottom of the box. Right. So it's the same idea. The difference is in one of those, you have the creative element of overcoming the functional fixedness of the box. That's kind of where the difference is. One of these is, this is a box of tacks, versus here's a box, here are some tacks, here's a candle, and how can I, one of them is creative in that you have to overcome the idea of functional fixedness with the box of tacks, and the other one is mechanical, because the box and the tacks are two separate things. Right, yeah, exactly. Use that as a catch plate. So businesses would benefit from knowing, when to hang a reward out there and when to not. They don't always know this, believe it or not. When businesses pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table, so what that basically translates into is, somewhere in the neighborhood of it's like $70,000 a year is roughly what that number is. Like, it basically, money doesn't incentivize you anymore. It doesn't make you that much happier. Doesn't really do a lot. Your bills are paid, so on and so forth. But when businesses pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table, it actually ends up fostering an environment of limitless return. So basically, we know, when we're paid well, it communicates to us that we're valued, we're important to our company, that our skills and our expertise are viewed as company assets. And people are going to be a little bit happier. They're going to be a little bit more, I think anyone has probably had this experience. If you're worried about how your bills are going to get paid or how you're going to put food on the table, it's really hard to get other stuff done, because you're stressed out and you're worried about other things. I've been going through this, with moving. There's a lot of tasks, things I've had to do. I've had to work on, I built a gate to kind of corral my children. And, I had to stop and say, okay, what's actually the best way to build this gate? How's the best way to do it? I did a lot of remodeling at my new house. So it's like, okay, well, again, a lot of it took some creative problem solving. And, what the best way to do things is not always clear. And when I'm under stress, I don't always have the best ideas. So what I've found is that, I really have to do my best to remain calm and stay centered. One of those big things, which I don't remember if it's come up, I think it's probably a week 4 concept, is mindfulness, which we'll come across next week. So be prepared and excited for mindfulness. But right, that's kind of what shows up next. So that's a great way to overcome kind of the anxiety and the frustration and all the stuff that comes along with stressors of the world. Self-determination theory explains human behavior from a different angle than traditional behavioral theories. Basically, it says that we're wired for personal growth, and that we're actually motivated intrinsically or from within. Our self-determination basically forms who we are as people. That's the whole idea behind self-determination theory. It starts off with what's described as the universal human needs, which are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And what I'll say about this, if you're into the whole, if you've studied psychology a lot, you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's basic human needs, but kind of your higher level needs are competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which it's not far off from autonomy, mastery, and purpose. They're definitely similar theories. When these needs are satisfied, we're motivated, we're productive, and we're more happy. Google does a pretty good job exemplifying how businesses and employees can benefit from using principles of self-determination theory. But I actually have a video that I'll get into that a little bit deeper with here moving forward. Who's heard the term gamification before? I'm sure you've all probably done some readings from this week, hopefully. Anyone? Gamification? Yes? No? Maybe. Some people have heard of it. Some people haven't. Gamification, it strategically implements fun. That's the whole idea of it. It creates an environment of engagement and motivation. And gamification techniques strive to leverage a person's natural desire for achievement and self-expression. There's an article that kind of goes through that. I believe it's in the readings. But gamification gets used a lot in marketing strategies. Make sure to check it out. If you haven't read the readings this week, make sure you do. Right, James. Feel free to jump in. The idea is using game mechanics in a non-game setting. So that's kind of the whole idea. Some of the things that come into it are, using badges, leaderboards, point systems, things like that. But you'll see it. It's all in the readings for this week. Gamification is pretty much everywhere. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it and said, "Oh, that they're trying to make this more appealing to me." And feel free, to jump in if you're like, "Oh, here's where I've seen gamification." The big one that I see all the time is, and it's everywhere, which is why I always use that example, is you think about McDonald's Monopoly game. Once a year or so, they say it's time for McDonald's Monopoly, and everyone, you buy your McDonald's food, and they give you your game pieces on your select items or whatever, and they say, okay, here it is. And they basically have said, okay, well, you're not just buying food, you're also playing this game. There are these prizes on the table. There's competition, and and people, a lot of people really get into it. They say, oh, I want to win this thing. I want to get a prize. Right. You want to win money or do whatever it is you want to do. Sure. That's a big one. The the other one I always think about, and I feel like it's maybe a little bit, it's not fast food related, so I like it a little bit more. Is the map app, like for your mobile device, called Waze, Waze, and basically what that is, if you haven't used it, it's a mapping feature. So it's just like you'd have your maps your map app on your phone for directions for GPS. But what Waze does is it has features where you can go in and if traffic is slowed down, you can report an accident on Waze. You can say, hey, there's an accident here, blah blah blah, or hey, there's a speed trap at this mile marker. And basically what Waze does is it gives you points for reporting stuff. And then when things are, if you pass by an accident and you say, oh, the accident's still there, you can say, it gives you the option, says, okay, is the accident still here? And you can say yes, or the accident is cleared up, and you can report that back in. And what they found is that they have, basically a network of people who are giving them real-time updates on traffic situations that they're not having to pay for. So you've effectively have gotten, you've crowdsourced traffic information and gotten really up to speed, results. And it seems like what a lot of people want in an app, you're sitting in traffic, and what you want to know is, why am I here, and how long will I be here? They've done a really great job answering those two questions. Here's why you're here, and here's where it's going to clear up, so you can kind of get an idea of when will this situation be better. So I think that they've done a really great job. I'd encourage everyone. You don't have to download the app. It doesn't, but like, look into it, see how they're using gamification. Can anyone think of other things, gamification techniques that they've seen? We mentioned Publishers Clearinghouse. Sure, they're say, if you sign up for this thing or whatever, we'll give you money. Anyone else? Can you think of different examples you've seen of gamification? If you think of any, feel free to jump in. If you go to the materials section, there's actually a video called Piano Staircase. We're going to take a minute and watch that. So just go into the materials section, click on the video that says Piano Staircase, and I will come back as soon as that's done. Yeah, James, take your time. Alrighty, so I think everybody's probably seen that. All right, James says, back when I was in high school, I used to volunteer at a kids' summer camp, and whenever we had to get the kids to go somewhere else, the trick was to say, I'll race you there, and it worked every time without fail. Yeah, no, it's a perfect example. When you give someone, make it a challenge, make it fun. People want to do that. They want to do something fun. They want the opportunity to win. They want to be good at something. It's just kind of the natural progression of how people want to, people want to be engaged in something that's fun. So, you can affect people's, choices and behavior by presenting them, different opportunities, which is exactly what gamification does. It says, hey, if you'll modify your behavior in this way, we'll give you this opportunity or reward. So, with piano staircase, it says, hey, you know what? Take the stairs. It frees up the escalator. It's a little bit healthier for you to take the stairs, and you get this fun of it. It's a piano. So yeah, that's kind of the idea is that you can influence people's behavior by giving them different chances and opportunities to have fun. So look at some of the companies that will do that. I think looking at play is probably one of the things. The whole play movement has done a lot for making workplaces a little bit more fun, mixing work in. We all see gamification in work culture of companies who are beating out their competition. The Zappos, Google, Pixar type companies of the world. Zappos has big parties. Google has they have amazing amenities, and Pixar is kind of similar to Google in a lot of those ways, giving people a lot of freedom. James says, similar to the video, some country in Europe gave people the option to do push-ups or something instead of paying a subway fee. Yeah, exactly. When you give people options, a lot of times they might make choices that surprise you. So a lot of these companies are what they're doing is creating the appropriate conditions for people so that they'll motivate themselves. Basically, getting them to work smarter and not harder. These companies are industry leaders because they push people outside, of their comfort zone, and they get them to push, the boundaries of where play ends, and where work begins. So I know we just came from video, but we're going to watch Inside Google. It is also in your material section. We'll watch that real quick, and we'll be right back. Alrighty, so hopefully everyone enjoyed that. Yeah, James, as you say, as a former New Yorker, you can talk for hours about how awesome Chelsea Market is. Cool. I'm glad to hear. I have been briefly to visit New York, but never spent a ton of time there. So I'm glad. I'm glad it is relatable. So right, I think Google does a pretty good job, and there's other videos. If you look, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that show what Google does. I know in their Silicon Valley office, they've got like big gardens. They've got like sports fields. And when you look at what real estate in Silicon Valley costs, and you look at Google and they're building, a full size, soccer pitch. It might not make sense initially, from a financial perspective, to say, "Oh, I just spent all this money on a soccer field," and then you think about what the returns are, what you're actually, what people are getting back from that, and you're keeping them happy. Um, Oh, interesting. James's fun fact: if you visit there, Google has custom Coke machines with bottles that say Google and the Coca-Cola font. That's pretty cool. But right, so basically, these companies are looking for ways to mix work and play. How to get that together. Creating an environment where creativity and imagination lead to higher efficiency, performance, and happiness. That's kind of the direction that everyone's going. Although it may seem counterintuitive, to traditional thinking of how we motivate each other, and of how human behavior works, it seems like we're mixing work and play together is kind of the best mix. And companies that are doing that end up with first and foremost, they have innovative leaders, and they aren't cookie cutter companies. They're the companies that are kind of breaking the mold, stepping out and saying, "Hey, how can we make this fun and productive?" They know their why. That's one of the big ones. If you look at, again, the golden circle, knowing your why, knowing why you're doing what you're doing. They know who they're reaching out to, and they have their targets. They know what their goals are, and they're pretty clear on the directions that they're going. And that's really what makes companies shine. This week you'll learn a little bit more, about the value of play on a larger scale, and how everything can be applied, to us as individuals. While you're reading stuff this week, think about, think about what motivates you from the inside out, and keep in mind those things that are going to help you along in the journey. Um, right. What's important to you, and what's going to keep you moving forward. So again, that's what we were talking about today. Does anyone have any questions? Questions about anything we talked about today? Anything maybe about this week? Aubrey, I agree. The key to success is balance. Yeah, being able to balance everything together. Totally. Okay, well, if you don't have any questions, that's it for me. I don't have anything else to present today. That's the end of it. So thanks everybody for being here. It was great having you all here. I appreciate your participation. Give me a shout if you have any questions. You can email me or email your specific instructors, whatever makes you happy. My email is jtmorton, MORTON, @fullsail.com. But yeah, you're all free to go. Thanks for being here. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll stick around. I'm going to stop our recording, but if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask them.